All right, today, let me scoop my chair forward here. Today I thought I would just show you what I've been doing the last 2 or 3 weeks off and on in between doing painting in the studio. I've been going to Montana, Shakespeare in the Park. I live in Montana. Their production of Cyrano, and they brought in three professional actors from around the country. They've been pulled from around the country. And then everybody else is local actors. I think there was like 21 actors in the production. So for Montana, for Bozeman, it was a big deal. So I've been threatening for years, because we're pretty heavy in the arts here, I've been threatening for years to come sketch them during the rehearsals, and they've been kind enough to say, come on over for the most part. And so I finally came on over. So these are the life sketches. So I don't have reference to show you on this, although I'll probably pull up, for this video, we'll probably pull up a couple of shots I've taken, just give you a feel for it, of the production later. It took a while to get permission to take photographs because it's a union production. Everybody has to agree that I'm allowed to take pictures because I'm not paying them for that. So they had to be kind enough to allow that, and they were all great. But it took a little bit of time for the bureaucracy to churn on through. So these, I did several days. I came once or twice a week, usually over about 3-week period, and a few times I came, I think 1 week I came more. And my son happened to be in the production as well. So it was his first adult, truly adult production as an adult. He just turned 18 and wants to be an actor. So it was a double pleasure for me to get to hang out, see this creative process is very different than my creative process, and a collaborative process, which of course art oftentimes is not. Certainly for fine art painters, it's not. So anyway, these are the sketches. I've got a few pages I'll flip through. And notice they're imperfect. Like here's the same character, Jeff. And you can see is certainly not a likeness that I've locked down. It varies a little bit and sometimes varies a lot. And so when you're working from life, it's critical you approach it in a certain way. Because otherwise you're going to beat yourself up and you're going to be disappointed, and it's not going to be fun. So first I'll tell you the mindset that I take when I start art, and hopefully any of my art. I try and remind myself of this. And so I go into it with the attitude that life is not perfect, but it's as perfect as it can be right now because I'm getting to draw and paint. And so it's the process that I protect. I protect the idea of doing art. I don't expect it to be great art. If it turns out to be something I like, that's a bonus. But the real joy and the real thing to be grateful for is the fact that I get to do art at all. I get to move out of my busy life of getting groceries and having families and being stuck in traffic, all that kind of survival stuff, and get to be in a studio or in a situation where I can put, in this case, a fountain pen to oatmeal paper and create something. And if it turns out to be something I like, then that's lovely. If it's not so great, that's practice. So it's either a gift or a lesson I'm getting, and in both cases I try and be grateful for that. So that's kind of the way I approach it. And keep in mind that life is full of challenges, and we know that very well. As I record this, we're right in the thick of the coronavirus worldwide. We're in partial or complete quarantines around the world. So there's lots of distractions. There's limitations to what I can do as an artist. I'm going to have limitations. I'm going to have good and bad days. I'm going to have more or less control of my craft. But with all of that, and with all the purposes and lessons that my life has waiting for me, I get to do art right now. I get to do something that's meaningful to me and try and create a little beauty in the world, which we can always use, and right now maybe we can use it a little bit more. So for me, when I sit down, I try and remember there's nothing more important that I should be doing than doing what I am doing. A lot of doings in there. And I'll do one more, doing art. I get to be doing art. So I wish we could edit that, but we won't do it. We'll leave it just as it is. So what I do, I kind of pretend that the artist Steve is this little child. And this is the way I developed compassion for myself, really, because I looked around and I didn't have any art training when I went to art college. It was just something I thought I would love to do if I could make a living at my hobby, but I had no sense of whether I was any good at it. And then later, I've now taught for 40 years. It's hard to believe, but I've been doing art for 45 and I've been teaching for 40 because I've always loved teaching. Sometimes I needed to teach to make a living. Sometimes I just plain enjoyed it because it was a great way to learn. I was being paid to practice. But I've seen a lot of people give up who were incredibly talented because they were so hard on themselves. So I always saw that as a problem. And so what I try and do is be as compassionate and kind to myself as I can. So the little story I tell myself is the artist in me, the artist Steve, is this little child. And that child, like I happen to have 4 children, I want to encourage. And if I see one of my children sit down and draw or paint or do crafts, I'll come over and take a look and I'll encourage them. I'm not going to criticize them and tell them the nose is too big or the forms are too flat. I'm going to try and just encourage the joy and the immersion they're having in the process, encourage them to do art. And the beautiful thing is that they're doing art. And sometimes those little kids do flat out beautiful things too. But that's not really the point at this stage in their life. It's to encourage them and make sure they feel safe and protected in doing their art. And I want to do the same thing for the little child inside of me. And I would expect that you want to do the same thing for yourself. So don't beat yourself up. Nurture that child and allow it to make mistakes and create. And that's one of the wonderful things about the sketchbook is just a place to try and play with. And encourage that child, love that child inside of you so that it feels safe enough to keep doing this. And in the keep doing it brings great joy in your life if you'll allow it, if you'll be a little kinder to yourself, and you're going to grow, you're going to get better and better. All right, so that's my little pep talk. Now, in terms of drawing from life, you're not going to have much time. These guys were wandering around, speaking their lines, being interrupted and reblocked on the stage by the director. And so it was very seldom that anybody stayed in place for more than about 30 seconds. So how do you catch a object, a being that's moving around, whether it's an animal in the zoo or your cat, you're wandering around the room? You know, sometimes they'll settle down and take a nap, you can draw them, but most of the time they're going to be moving. They're going to be disrupted and changing place. So what I want to do is I want to try and capture the simple shapes and the simple key shapes. So in this case, most of it was heads. Some of it was doing figures. But I want to capture the simple ideas, and then if I have time, I add to it. And as you move through your career, you'll retain more and more information. So as Joe in this case, as Joe is standing there waiting for his cue line to begin his dialogue, he held for a couple moments, again, maybe 30 seconds, maybe I got a minute in 10% of these. But in that time, if I can capture on the page this simple shape, but more than that, not just the simple, but the simple yet characteristic. And so you can see kind of, if you look carefully, you can see the draw through lines for this shape for the face of Jeff. And then he had a very specific hairstyle that was quite different than Keegan's hairstyle or Joe's hairstyle or Kara's hairstyle. And so I'm going to draw the shape of their face, simple yet characteristic. The shape of Jeff's profile will be very different than Kara's profile or Keegan's profile. There'll be a beard or not, there'll be glasses or not, there'll be a strong long chin or short. There's going to be a certain distance back to the ear will be a certain height to the eyebrow line, and then of course the hair shape. So we have two criteria as we begin our sketch. As simple as possible so I can get it down quickly and cleanly, and as characteristic as possible, so not generic, that simple shape of that particular face, simple yet characteristic. And you can see when the face shape is not quite characteristic enough, these all started simple, so this is the same model here. If they're not characteristic enough, it doesn't look like the model. And so if you can get not exactly the shape of the eyelid or the convolutions of the ear, but that characteristic bigger structure, the likeness then is I don't know, 80% there. You know, the actual bumps in the nose and the arc of the eyelid and that kind of stuff, that helps a lot, but it's the bigger structure that's critical. Excuse me. So that's what I try to do as I go through these things and capture, you know, if you've got somebody sitting waiting, you're going to have a little bit more time. If you have somebody ready to be on guard, you're going to have much less time. This was Chris, the stunt coordinator and choreographer for the fight scenes, the sword playing. So sitting down, you got a little bit more time. But in any case, simple yet characteristic. So what's the hint of a mouth and the hint of a nose and eye socket and hairstyle and jaw that suggests a lovely young woman as opposed to a little more grizzled older man, say. Capture that. And then what you'll do, if I can get that simple beginning of the shape, if the sketch warrants it and I have time I want to devote to it, then I'll watch the model as he or she passes back through that pose. So Chris is standing there ready to be on guard, and then he begins, and I can't draw anymore. Two things will happen then. I will have retained more information because of the 40 years of practice, so you'll retain as much as you can at your stage, of what things we're doing. I'll have scanned this and kind of get a sense of what those folds were doing. They were bunching and kind of splaying out from the back of the knee here. They gathered over the tennis shoe. And so I'll be able to draw a little bit more from my knowledge of what a hand and wrist would do in that position, or my memory, the visual imprint of what he was specifically doing before he moved. And then he'll do his stuff, and then hopefully he'll come back to something similar. And then the head eventually will turn back into a profile, and I'll catch that profile again and be able to lay it down in. And then I can start to take it farther. The other thing I can do as I'm sketching, I can, draw Todd as much as I can as he's got his script in his hand, waiting, working through his lines with the director over here or his co-star over here. And then he shifts his legs, tilts his hips, does something different. I can't use that anymore. Maybe I can find somebody else, because there's 21 people out there sometimes. I'll steal somebody else's legs, put those in. So that becomes the primary strategy. And then as we draw the same character over and over, and I can't even tell if this is Keegan again or not. It could be Chris. Then we start to get a little clearer understanding of what that particular head. Here's Keegan again. And he had this great beard, great hairline, really high cheekbones, a kind of a boxer's nose, but slightly turned up, deep sockets, did I say high cheekbones? Really great character stuff to work with. And then Riley had real sharp features and this pulled back, really wavy, curly hair that was perfect for the period piece he was doing. And so those kind of distinct ideas rather than a general smooth nose or a clean jawline. You know, Todd is an older gentleman and he had this great bone structure, but his jawline was a little softer. So actually this isn't even Todd, this is Eric. Much younger man, and I made him look too old. But it was a sketch, that's okay. You know, I might well want to age him. So anyway, just having fun with this. And then the last point is, when you're drawing someone quickly, or you're going to do, here's kind of an abstracted little study. At this point, I was able to shoot reference. So the 2 or 3 paintings I have in this are based on the reference, not on the live model moving around. But then play up a little bit of a caricature. If it's high cheeks, make them higher. If it's a bumpy, sloping forehead, push that brow ridge out a little stronger. Hook that nose fuller. Make that beard stronger shape for the chin, that kind of stuff. You can see I'm at the end of my sketchbook here. This one's unfinished. I haven't finished that one yet. And the production actually got shut down at this point because of the virus. We had to suspend it and never got to perform it. So taking things from, this is all the same model, and yet the likenesses are not solid. They all vary from person to person. So anyway, that's my tips for the day, I guess, for how to sketch and how to be kind to yourself as you're sketching. Go out and try it and have some fun, and we will talk next time.